Brazil, and you said maybe. So when did you find out about UFC 300?
I found out for sure that it was locked in since I've been in this, since I got to the venue. We talked about it, and I agreed to it yesterday.
So you were being honest with me when you said maybe, because that probably was still on the table.
Hey, look, Sweet Dream's not gonna lie to the people. I didn't lie to you guys. I told you what I knew, partially.
So are those your real teeth? Now that I'm getting honest answers from you, are those your real teeth or are those grills?
I haven't drilled. No, these grills. These grills. I haven't switched in to getting them just drilled in just yet. I still got good teeth underneath these.
You should get like a mouth guard that looks like that for 300.
Run at it though.
All right, I like the sound of that. So Alex Pereira, very, very dangerous man, but of course, so are you. What are you looking forward to in terms of this matchup?
I'm looking forward to the challenge, man. I'm looking forward to the challenge. The challenge of Alex is become huge. You know, he's done incredible things. 2 division champion in the UFC in 7 fights, quickest to ever do it. You know, and I just want to get in there and see how I match up against him.
How difficult that this injury is taken care of and that you're good to go?
It's come with just challenges. You know, I've had my challenges here and there, but you know, I had a good support group behind me. I had a good team working with me at the UFC. Shout out to the UFC PI, the whole physical therapy staff there. My boy Alex and SNC. You know, those guys, they've been rocking with me, been with me hands on this throughout this entire process, just making sure that, hey, just do this. Hey, just do this. Trust us and just do this. And that's what I did, and I can't be more happy with that.
Of course, it's obviously a big deal to headline UFC 300. This is a marquee event in the history of this promotion. So
announced the main event for UFC 300. It's going to be Jamahal versus Alex Pereira. And as you just heard, Jamahal just found out that he's fighting Alex Pereira for UFC 300 yesterday. And before, I start whining and complaining, as I always do, I gotta admit, I'm surprised they made this fight for 300. I absolutely love this fight. I love this matchmaking. This is the fight that I wanted to see. And if you guys watch my video on me discussing what main event I wanted for UFC 300 out of the possibilities, out of the most possible options, Jamahal versus Alex Pereira was my favorite option, just because I think the fight stylistically, it's an amazing fight. I get it, Jamahal is not a big superstar, but I think he could do a good enough job of selling the fight. Alex Pereira has become a massive superstar in the UFC. And even though it's not Conor McGregor, even though it's not like an Islam Makhachev or a Khabib, I think that I would accept it as a main event because I really like the matchup. I think it's a fascinating matchup. I think Jamahal has a very good chance of winning. I think Alex Pereira is a very exciting fighter. And for the most part, Alex Pereira delivers with the main events and stuff like that. Like, he's rarely in a boring fight besides maybe the Yan fight, but that was mostly due to Yan. So I love this matchup. However, let me start complaining a little bit. Let me start complaining. I'm a little bit worried because I don't think Jamahal has actually recovered. The fact that he barely found out about this fight yesterday, is barely locked and loaded. He was barely asked yesterday if he could headline UFC 300, just tells you how desperate the UFC was. And it also tells you that in a way Jamahal was kind of pressured to headline UFC 300 when, let's be honest, he's probably not ready because he did suffer an Achilles injury. He has been going through a lot of personal issues with the court case with his brother, which I'm not going to go into. But he's been going through a lot, and I don't think that Jamahal is in shape. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get it. The guy's going to go into fight camp, and he's going to be ready for the fight. But, like, when you're coming off an injury that severe, you have to be training months before you even get to a training camp. And the fact that right now he's forced to go into a training camp for a fight that is like around 2 months away, which is 8 weeks, that's not a lot of time. And Jamahal does gain a lot of weight in the off season. I'm very concerned for him, honestly. And which in a way it does take away some of my hype away from the fight because I want to see the best version of Jamahal versus Alex Pereira. I don't want to see a Jamahal coming off the couch that was forced to headline UFC 300 because Dana White didn't have any other main event that he liked, and we're really just putting Jamahal Hill in there with not the best in not the best position. You know what I'm saying? He's not going in there in the best place just because we need a main event for UFC 300. Like, as a fight fan, I don't want to see that. You know, I feel like in 2023 we learned that we want the matchups, but we want the matchups when both guys are ready to go, because that's when you get the best fights. When a fighter is going on a short notice fight or he's coming off an injury, you rarely get the best out of the fight. You know what I'm saying? And we even saw with Yuri Prohaska. I mean, he was coming off a shoulder injury and he didn't even come back until a year, about 13 months later. And, you know, he looked a bit rusty in there, in my opinion. I thought he looked a bit rusty in there. And then Jamahal Hill is coming off an Achilles injury. And I do not believe that he was actually ready for UFC 300. I feel like Dana White forced them, like, hey man, we need a main event for UFC 300. We're going to offer you a lot of money. You're going to be the main event of a super card. Will you take it? And Jamahal Hill, being a fighter, he's going to say yes. But do you guys really think that Jamal is in the best position to go into this fight? And that's the thing that concerns me. Now, another thing. Why is this fight taking place at UFC 300? Wouldn't it make sense for this fight to take place at UFC 301 in Brazil? I mean, the Brazil card is in May, a month later, and you would think that they would want Alex Pereira versus Jamahal Hill. It even makes sense narrative-wise because Jamahal Hill defeated Glover Teixeira in Brazil, who is Glover Teixeira's Alex Pereira's coach. So even narrative-wise, it doesn't really make sense for Jamahal Hill versus Alex Pereira to be on UFC 300. But it just tells you that these guys really had no plan. There was no plan for UFC 300. There really wasn't. The fact that Jamahal Hill did not know about this fight until yesterday, and Dana White announced it right away, just tells you that they had no other fights. I mean, it was probably Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad, and the UFC probably didn't want to make that as the headliner. And I love the fight. Like I said, I love the fight. I want to see this fight. This is one of my most anticipated fights. However, I don't want to see a Jamahal Hill that's rushing back into the octagon just because the UFC needs a main event. Like, I want to see the best version of Jamahal Hill versus Alex Pereira, because I do believe that Jamahal Hill, if he goes into this fight at his best, he has a really good shot of beating someone like Alex Pereira. And if not, at least it's going to be super competitive. And now, under these circumstances, like, I feel like I have to pick Alex Pereira to win this fight because Jamahal Hill is coming off an injury. I really don't believe that he was ready to fight for UFC 300, which to me, I was like, okay, it always made sense that Jamahal Hill versus Alex Pereira would take place at UFC 301, especially since that card is taking place in Brazil. So this is kind of like weird to me. Honestly, it's strange. It's strange. I'm not mad about it because, like I said, I love the matchup. And I think that at this point, I've accepted UFC 300 for what it is. And the reality is, you know, it's hard to make these fights because, like Dana White was saying, fighters have injuries, negotiation problems, timing. You know, they just stacked 298. They stacked 299. UFC 300. There's really not a lot of big superstars right now in the UFC. Adesanya's coming off a knockout loss. Dricus du Plessis just fought recently. You really can't justify Adesanya versus Alex Pereira as a trilogy because Adesanya's coming off a loss. So if he wins the light heavyweight belt, it really messes up the division. And then who else? I feel like I'm missing someone. Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad is not a fight that really sells. Leon Edwards just came off a very boring performance against Colby Covington. Right now, you know, it's not like people are dying to see Leon Edwards back in the octagon, and not only are people not excited for that, but then he's gonna be facing somebody like Bilal Muhammad who deserves a title shot. But let's be honest, like, Bilal Muhammad is incredibly boring. I don't think his fighting style is as boring as people make it out to seem, but obviously Bilal Muhammad is not someone who could headline UFC 300. And I could understand how some of you could even make that argument for Jamahal Hill. However, like I said, I think the fight stylistically, it's a very entertaining matchup. I love the matchup. And I would have had no problem if Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad was on UFC 300. I just didn't want to see it as the main event. Like, if it's the co-main event, I have no problem with that. Like, it's still a great fight. It's the fight that should take place next. And I'm glad. Like, I just want to say this. I'm so happy that the UFC did not make Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira, because that would have been a travesty. That would have been a tragedy. So at least I'm happy that Dana White is smart enough to know that Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira would be one of the most stupid fights the UFC has ever done. So at least they were logical in that sense. However, like I said, going back to it, Jamahal Hill, I don't think he's recovered, man. And I don't like it because I want to see the best version of Jamahal Hill versus Alex Pereira. I don't want to see this version of like, oh man, they told me 8 weeks ago, I wasn't really training. Now I have to step into a training camp. And, I had been recovering from my injury, but it's different to like be resting and recovering from your injury than actually getting back into a training camp and then actually having to get back in shape. Like now that he has to get into actual shape, he might get injured. He might get another injury, because he hasn't really been fighting. So that's something to take into consideration. So this is very random to me, very strange. I did not really expect this. I really expected this fight to take place in May. So now I'm kind of curious to see what's going to be the main event of Brazil. Like, is it going to be Pantoja versus somebody? I don't feel like Pantoja is a big enough star to main event a Brazil card, a pay-per-view. But if maybe they could make that Brazil card a fight night, maybe Pantoja versus somebody is good enough, but very random. This is very strange, but it really just tells us how desperate the UFC was for a main event and how truly they had no plan. And I just hope that Jamahal Hill is able to train properly, that he's really ready, and that we get an amazing fight for UFC 300. Like I said, I don't think UFC 300 is as bad as some people are making out to seem. I still think it's a solid card. Definitely not what we would have expected a year ago. But when you think of the matchups, Jamahal Hill, Alex Pereira, an amazing matchup. Gaethje Holloway, a very fun matchup. Yang Weili versus Zhang Jianan, a fight that should happen next, but it's going to be very entertaining. Yang Weili is a very entertaining female fighter. Not a fight that I would have put on UFC 300's main card. I don't think it makes a lot of sense, but it's an okay fight. You know what I'm saying? It's whatever. Charles Oliveira versus Armin Tsarukyan. I love that fight so much. Calvin Kattar versus Aljamain Sterling. I think that's a very fun matchup. Yuri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. Okay fight, in my opinion, because Rakic is not a very entertaining fighter, but any Yuri Prochazka fight is going to be very entertaining. Who else is on the card? Diego Lopez. I'd love to see that guy fight. Cody Garbrandt versus David Figueroa. Amazing fight. Kayla Harrison versus Holly Holm. Worst fight on the card. Rodriguez versus Andrade. That's going to be a fun fight. You know what I'm saying? Not a fight that I would have put on UFC 300. But if you're going to put a female fight, I think that fight is decent enough. But ultimately, UFC 300 feels good enough. But strange. It's a very strange card, in my opinion. I get it. On paper, you could be like, well, look how many former champions. But like I've been saying for the longest, it's not only about having former champions on the card, but you also have to make the best, most interesting stylistic fights for them to be entertaining. Like if you put Cody Brundage versus Bo Nickal, Bo Nickal is a prospect that we want to see in the middleweight division. But against Cody Brundage, like really? You know what I'm saying? So I feel like UFC 300 suffers from the fact that, yes, there's a lot of former champions, but the matchups are not great. You know what I'm saying? The matchups are not great. The best matchup, in my opinion, is probably Charles Oliveira versus Armin Tsarukyan. That fight is an absolute banger. I absolutely love that fight. I almost wish they would have moved Yang Weili versus Zhang Jianan for UFC 299's co-main event, and then you move Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis for UFC 300. Because at least there you have Charles Oliveira versus Armin Tsarukyan, Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis. You have Gaethje versus Holloway, Pereira versus Hill, and then you have Yuri Prochazka versus Rakic. Amazing. You know what I'm saying? So, and I feel like Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis feels more like a fight that will take place at 300, while I feel like Yang Weili and Yang Jianan, I feel like that makes more sense for UFC 299. So let me know what you guys think about that. Like I said, I love the matchup. I love that Hill's getting a title shot. I just feel like these are not the most optimal circumstances for Hill going into this fight, which kind of bums me out because I really, really love this fight. I hope we get the best version of Jamahal Hill, but I don't think so, man. I think right now, we're still a couple months away, but I think Alex Pereira is most likely going to win this fight. He's been more active. He has a lot of power. We don't know how Jamahal Hill is going to come off that injury. He hasn't fought in quite a while, so it's just unfortunate in my opinion. It's very unfortunate. I wish the UFC would have done a better job of planning this. Like Jamahal Hill's coming off an injury. Like I said, he gains a lot of weight in the offseason. So now he has to worry about getting in shape and also being ready to fight someone like Alex Pereira. I mean, he doesn't have to really worry about the grappling. But Alex Pereira, I mean, he's dangerous on the feet. You know, he lands one left hook, you're going to be out. You know what I'm saying? Against Yuri Prohaska. Now, I do feel Jamahal is a little more technical, a little bit more powerful than somebody like Yuri Prohaska. And I think he could get it done. I think he could get it done. But definitely not what you guys expected for UFC 300. But I'm definitely not mad about it because I know a lot of people were like, oh my God, this is such a terrible main event. I like the main event, honestly. I'm going to be real with you guys. I like the main event, but let me know what you guys think down below and make sure to like and subscribe. I appreciate you guys watching my channel and commenting and being active. I love responding to you guys and just thank you. I'm just grateful that I have some viewers out here. And I mean, even if I didn't have any viewers, I'd still be posting videos because I love MMA that much. But anyway, guys, I hope you guys have a good one and I'll see you guys in the next one.